In just 31 seconds, country music superstar Blake Shelton went from charming guest to public enemy number one on The View's set, as Joy Behar launched what can only be described as a calculated character assassination that left the singer visibly shaken and the studio audience in stunned silence. What started as light banter about his latest album quickly spiraled into a vicious political ambush that exposed the toxic underbelly of daytime television. The tension was palpable from the moment Shelton walked onto the set. Joy Behar's smile seemed forced, her usual theatrical warmth replaced by something colder, more predatory. The other co-hosts exchanged nervous glances as Shelton settled into his chair, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "Blake, welcome back to The View," Behar began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here, especially given your interesting political views these days." Shelton's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Well, thanks for having me, Joy. Always good to be here with you ladies." "Oh, I'm sure it is," Behar continued, her tone already shifting. "Tell me, how does it feel to be one of the few country stars who hasn't completely sold out to the liberal Hollywood elite?" The studio audience murmured uncomfortably. Shelton shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard by the loaded question. "I don't really think of it in those terms, Joy. I just try to be authentic to who I am and where I come from." Behar leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Authentic? That's interesting, because some might say that your recent endorsements and public statements suggest you're being quite authentic about some pretty troubling beliefs." "I'm not sure what you're getting at," Shelton replied, his Oklahoma drawl becoming more pronounced as his defenses rose. "Oh, come on, Blake. Don't play dumb with us. We all know where you stand politically. The question is, do you really think your platform gives you the right to influence your fans towards such divisive rhetoric?" The other co-hosts looked visibly uncomfortable. Whoopi Goldberg attempted to interject. "Joy, maybe we should—" "No, Whoopi," Behar cut her off sharply. "I think our audience deserves to know exactly who they're supporting when they buy Blake's music or watch The Voice." Shelton's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Joy, I came here to talk about my new album and my tour, not to be ambushed about my personal political beliefs." "Ambushed?" Behar laughed mockingly. "Blake, you're a public figure. Your beliefs affect millions of people. Surely you can handle a few tough questions." "Tough questions are one thing," Shelton shot back, his voice rising slightly. "But what you're doing right now feels more like an attack than journalism." The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing the real animosity building between the two. Behar's mask was slipping, revealing the contempt she'd been harboring. "An attack, Blake? I'm simply asking you to take responsibility for your influence. When you publicly support candidates and policies that hurt marginalized communities, don't you think you owe it to your fans to explain yourself?" "I support candidates who I believe will be good for this country," Shelton replied firmly. "That's my right as an American citizen." "You're right, yes," Behar sneered. "But what about your responsibility? What about the LGBTQ+ fans who look up to you, only to find out you support politicians who want to strip away their basic rights?" Shelton's face flushed red. "Now hold on just a damn minute, Joy. You don't get to tell me what I believe or who I support based on your twisted interpretation of—" "Twisted?" Behar interrupted, her voice becoming shrill. "Blake, it's not twisted when it's documented fact. Your donations, your endorsements, your social media activity, it's all public record. And none of it suggests I have anything against gay people or any other group," Shelton fired back. "You're putting words in my mouth and spinning narratives that simply aren't true." The tension in the studio was suffocating. Camera operators were getting close-ups of both participants, capturing every micro-expression of anger and frustration. "Oh, so now I'm a liar?" Behar's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "Blake, when you support politicians who vote against marriage equality, who support conversion therapy, who want to ban books with LGBTQ+ themes from schools, what exactly are we supposed to think?" "You're supposed to think that political issues are complicated, and that supporting someone doesn't mean you agree with every single thing they've ever said or done," Shelton responded, his patience clearly wearing thin. "How convenient," Behar scoffed. The old, "I don't agree with everything they do" defense. Tell me, Blake, what would it take? What would these politicians have to do before you'd stop supporting them? Put LGBTQ plus people in camps? The studio audience gasped audibly. Even the other co-hosts looked shocked at Behar's escalation. Shelton stood up slightly in his chair, his voice rising dangerously. Now that's completely out of line, Joy. You can disagree with my politics all you want, but don't you dare suggest I'd support something like that. Is it out of line? Behar pressed, clearly energized by getting a reaction. Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're perfectly willing to support politicians who view certain groups of people as less than human. That's bullshit and you know it, Shelton snapped, the profanity causing several gasps from the audience. Behar's eyes lit up with triumph. She had him exactly where she wanted him, angry, defensive, and looking bad on national television. There it is, she said with satisfaction. The real Blake Shelton, everyone. When confronted with the truth about his political choices, he resorts to profanity and anger instead of taking responsibility. The truth? Shelton's voice was incredulous. Joy, you've been twisting my words and making assumptions about my character since the moment I sat down. This isn't truth. This is a hit job. The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, with neither participant willing to back down, and something explosive was clearly about to happen. Behar leaned back in her chair with a smug expression, clearly relishing the chaos she had orchestrated. You know what, Blake? Your anger right now is proving my exact point. This is how you react when someone challenges your precious political beliefs, with hostility and profanity. My anger? Shelton's voice cracked with disbelief. Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes accusing me of supporting human rights violations. Any decent person would be pissed off by that kind of character assassination. Character assassination? Behar's laugh was cold and calculated. Blake, I'm not assassinating your character. I'm exposing it. There's a difference. The other co-hosts were now actively trying to intervene. Sarah Haynes cleared her throat loudly. Maybe we should take a commercial break and... No, Behar snapped, not taking her eyes off Shelton. We're just getting to the good part. Blake, let's talk about your recent comments about transgender athletes. Care to explain those to our audience? Shelton's face went pale, then flushed red again. What comments? What the hell are you talking about now? Oh, you don't remember? The interview you gave to that Nashville radio station last month where you said, and I quote, I think we need to protect women's sports. Care to elaborate on what exactly you think women need protection from? That's completely taken out of context. Shelton shot back, his voice getting louder. I was talking about fairness and competition, not targeting anyone. Fairness? Behar's voice dripped with sarcasm. Blake, when you use coded language like protecting women's sports, everyone knows exactly what you mean. You're targeting transgender women, and you're using fear-mongering tactics to do it. That's not what I meant, and that's not what I said, Shelton insisted, gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were turning white. You're twisting my words again, Joy. This is exactly the kind of dishonest media manipulation that drives people crazy. Dishonest? Behar's voice rose to match his. Blake, I have the transcript right here. Would you like me to read your exact words to our audience? She reached for a stack of papers that had been planted beside her chair, clearly prepared for this moment. The theatrical gesture was obvious to everyone watching. This had been planned from the beginning. You know what? Shelton stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I don't give a damn what papers you've got there, Joy. This whole thing has been a setup from minute one. The studio audience was now completely captivated by the unfolding drama. Security personnel could be seen moving closer to the stage area, clearly anticipating that the situation might escalate further. A setup? Behar feigned innocence while her eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. Blake, this is journalism. I'm asking you direct questions about your public statements and your political positions. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Journalism? Shelton's laugh was bitter and incredulous. Joy, what you're doing isn't journalism. It's a goddamn witch hunt. You brought me here under false pretenses so you could ambush me with this political hit job. False pretenses? Behar was now standing as well, matching his aggressive posture. Blake, you're a public figure with political opinions. Those opinions affect people's lives. I have every right to ask you about them. You have the right to ask, but I have the right not to be sandbagged by someone who's clearly had it out for me from the start, Shelton fired back, his Oklahoma accent thick with anger. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Other co-hosts were looking around desperately for producers to intervene, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every heated exchange. Had it out for you? Behar's voice became shrilly theatrical. Blake, I don't even think about you when you're not here. But when you come on my show spouting your backwards political views, you bet your ass I'm going to call you out on it. My backwards views? Shelton stepped closer to the table, his voice dangerous and low. Joy, just because I don't toe the line for your liberal agenda doesn't make my views backwards. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle anyone who thinks differently than you do. Liberal agenda? Behar screeched, her composure completely gone now. Blake, human rights aren't a liberal agenda, they're basic decency. Something you apparently know nothing about. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The studio audience was dead silent, sensing that a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Shelton's face went from red to almost purple with rage. Basic decency? You want to talk about basic decency, Joy? How about the decency of not ambushing your guests? How about the decency of not twisting someone's words to fit your narrative? How about the decency of treating people with different political views like they're still human beings? Different political views? Behar was now shouting. Blake, we're not talking about tax policy here. We're talking about your support for politicians who want to roll back civil rights protections. We're talking about your dismissal of marginalized communities. That's not political difference. That's moral failure. The accusation of moral failure was the final straw. Shelton slammed his hand down on the table with such force that water glasses jumped and the entire surface shook. Moral failure? His voice was now a roar that could probably be heard in the hallway. Joy. The only moral failure I see here is a talk show host who's so consumed with her own self-righteousness that she's willing to destroy someone's reputation based on lies and distortions. Behar matched his volume, screaming back at him across the small space. Lies and distortions? Everything I've said is documented fact, Blake. The only one lying here is you, lying to yourself about what your political choices really mean. Documented fact my ass, Shelton shouted back. You've taken quotes out of context, made assumptions about my beliefs, and turned this whole interview into a character assassination. This isn't journalism, Joy. This is a fucking hit piece. The profanity caused audible gasps from the studio audience. Several people could be seen covering their mouths in shock. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to crawl under the table, but Behar wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the chaos she had created. A hit piece? Blake, I'm giving you the opportunity to explain your positions. If you can't do that without resorting to profanity and personal attacks, that says everything our audience needs to know about your character. The hypocrisy of her statement, accusing him of personal attacks after spending 20 minutes attacking his character, was so blatant that even some audience members could be seen shaking their heads in disbelief. Shelton stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with anger and disbelief. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet, which somehow made it even more menacing than his previous shouting. My character, Joy? Let me tell you about character. Character is being honest about your intentions when you invite someone on your show. Character is asking tough questions without twisting someone's words to fit your agenda. Character is treating your guests with basic human decency, even when you disagree with them politically. He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering what felt like a final verdict. What you've done here today isn't journalism, it isn't activism, and it sure as hell isn't entertainment. It's just plain cruel. And if this is what passes for television these days, then maybe it's time for me to get the hell out of here. The threat of his departure hung in the air like a storm cloud, and everyone in the studio could sense that the situation was about to explode completely. Behar, however, seemed to interpret his threat as weakness rather than warning. Her eyes narrowed with predatory satisfaction as she prepared to deliver what she clearly believed would be the killing blow. Oh, so now you're going to run away? She taunted, her voice dripping with mock concern. Blake, that's exactly what I'd expect from someone who can't defend their indefensible positions. When confronted with the truth, You fold like a cheap suit." The condescending tone was the match that lit the fuse. Shelton's entire demeanor shifted, his anger transforming from hot rage into something cold and calculated. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute finality. "You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right. I am going to leave. But not because I can't defend my positions. I'm leaving because this isn't a conversation. It's not journalism, and it sure as hell isn't worth my time." He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and purposeful. The simple action sent shockwaves through the studio as everyone realized this wasn't just a threat anymore. "Blake, sit down," Behar commanded, suddenly realizing she might have pushed too far. "We're not finished here." "Oh, we're finished all right," Shelton replied, dropping his mic pack on the table with a loud thud. "We were finished the moment you decided to turn what should have been a conversation about music into a political ambush designed to make me look like some kind of monster." The other co-hosts were now frantically trying to salvage the situation. Whoopi Goldberg stood up, her hands raised peacefully. "Blake, let's just take a breath here and—" "No, Whoopi," Shelton cut her off, but his tone with her was respectful, making it clear his anger was directed solely at Behar. "I appreciate you trying to keep the peace, but there's no coming back from this. Joy made her choice when she decided to ambush me, and now I'm making mine." Behar, sensing control of the situation slipping away, made one final desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. "Blake, if you walk out of here, everyone's going to know exactly who you really are. You'll prove every point I've made about your character." Shelton turned to face her directly, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had reached their absolute limit. "Joy, the only thing walking out of here proves is that I have enough self-respect not to sit here and be abused by someone who invited me on their show under false pretenses. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about the character it takes to look someone in the eye, smile at them, and then systematically try to destroy their reputation on national television." He gestured toward the audience, many of whom were now clearly on his side, having witnessed Behar's tactics firsthand. "These people aren't stupid, Joy. They can see exactly what you've done here today. You didn't expose my character, you exposed your own." The truth of his words hung in the air like an accusation. Several audience members could be seen nodding in agreement, and even some of the production crew looked uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. Behar, realizing she was losing the room, made one last desperate play. "Blake, you can't just run away every time someone asks you tough questions about your beliefs. That's not how the real world works." "Tough questions?" Shelton's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Joy, tough questions are, why did you choose this song for your album? Or, how do you balance touring with family life? What you did here was character assassination disguised as journalism. There's a difference, and deep down you know it." He began walking toward the edge of the stage, his exit becoming inevitable with each step. "You know what the real tragedy is here?" he continued, not bothering to turn around. "I actually came here excited to talk about my music, my tour, the things my fans actually care about. Instead, you turned it into this circus because you couldn't resist the opportunity to take shots at someone whose politics you disagree with." Behar made one final attempt to salvage her position. "Blake, politics matter. Your influence matters. When you support candidates who—" "Stop!" Shelton's voice cut through her words like a knife. He turned around one last time, his expression a mixture of disgust and pity. "Just stop, Joy. You've said enough. Hell, you've said too much. I hope whatever ratings boost you get from this ambush was worth it, because you've shown everyone exactly who you are." The silence that followed was deafening. The entire studio seemed frozen in time as Shelton stood at the edge of the stage, his departure imminent but not yet complete. Then, breaking the silence, came something unexpected: applause. It started with just a few audience members, but quickly spread throughout the studio. The sound seemed to startle Behar, who looked around in confusion and growing panic as she realized the audience was applauding Shelton's departure, not her performance. "This is unbelievable," she muttered, her voice picked up by her still active microphone. "He attacks me for doing my job, storms off like a child, and you people applaud him? The comment was a tactical error that revealed her complete lack of self-awareness. The applause grew louder, with some audience members now standing. It was clear that they had witnessed something that disgusted them, and it wasn't Shelton's behavior. Shelton paused at the sound of the applause, a sad smile crossing his face. "Thank you," he said simply, addressing the audience directly. "Thank you for seeing through the bullshit and recognizing that what happened here today wasn't journalism or entertainment. It was just mean, spirited, and wrong." He looked back at Behar one final time, and when he spoke, there was no anger left in his voice, only disappointment. "Joy, I genuinely hope you figure out someday that you can disagree with someone's politics without trying to destroy them as a person. Until then, I'll be out there making music for people who actually want to hear it, instead of sitting in studios with people who just want to tear me down." With that, Blake Shelton walked off the View set, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who had finally met her match. The audience continued applauding until he was completely out of sight, their message unmistakable. They had witnessed something ugly, and they knew exactly who was responsible for it. As the applause finally died down, Behar sat in her chair looking shell-shocked, surrounded by co-hosts who wouldn't make eye contact with her and an audience that had just delivered a verdict she clearly hadn't expected. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of her humiliation as the consequences of her actions played out in real time. In the end, what was supposed to be Joy Behar's moment of triumph had become her most public failure, witnessed by millions, and leaving no doubt about who had crossed the line and who had maintained their dignity under fire. Blake Shelton had walked away with his reputation intact, while Behar was left to face the uncomfortable reality that her brand of gotcha journalism had finally backfired spectacularly. The interview that was meant to destroy Blake Shelton had instead revealed the true nature of its architect, and the audience's reaction made it clear that they didn't like what they had seen.